Knowing your personality type and the other personality types that are there out of the 4 personality types can be a game changer to your career, to your business, to everything that you do. Because once you understand this, then you understand yourself better, you understand how to get the best out of other people better, and you understand everybody's strengths and weak points and how that can work in a good way rather than the not so good way. And so if you don't already know what your personality type out of the 4 is, because there are 4, there are the high achiever, the leader, the people person, and the calming presence, and they are all based off the 4 F's: flight, fight, freeze, fawn. Those are the 4, and they come from Pete Walker's book. Now, Pete Walker wrote a book on complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So it was from surviving to thriving, but it was an old school book, good old Pete. And when I was reading this book, obviously this is to do with people who've gone through complex trauma. So this is sort of childhood abuse or any situation that was longer term. But for most people, we fall into these 4 categories as well, but on a smaller level. So maybe not as extreme as someone who's had a very complex or severe childhood. So regardless, take this knowing that these personality types really are based on stress and the primal brain, like what your default network is when you're under stress and pressure, which for most of us, stress and pressure happens when we're in the workplace. So before we get into the 4 types, let's get into it back to the Burnout to Brilliance podcast.
I'm Australia's leading burnout therapist, Sheena Shuey. I'm Australia's leading burnout therapist, Sheena Shuey, live from
Anxiety is not something that happens to you, it is something that happens for you.
Sheena, it is so nice to have you. I'm going to get straight to the point. What does burnout mean?
Oh, that is a really big question.
All right, so if you haven't already taken my quiz, I have it linked below. You can find out your personality type. It's only 7 questions, and you can either sign up to the email chain and get some information about that personality type so you can learn more about yourself, or you can just get the result and talk about it today. Now, again, there's 4 types that you're going to get. There's only 7 questions, but I recommend doing the quiz first before listening to this episode if you can, because it'll make a bit more sense. But regardless if you do the quiz or not, you should be able to pick up on which type you are as we talk them through, because it's important to know all the different types so you know whether you're hiring staff in your business, whether you're supervising staff, whether you're dealing with clients on a daily basis. If you work with any kind of people on a daily basis, these types are going to help you if you can keep some of this in mind. So, the thing about each type is every type has some strengths and weaknesses or areas of improvement. Again, nowadays we don't say weaknesses, we say areas of improvement. So every type has good and a great side and a not so good side. So there's no better type or worse type, right? So if you get a result where you want to be a leader or you want to be a high achiever, just because of the titles there, do ignore that, right? Because I want you to remember that every single one of these types make incredible leaders. Every single one of these types can be a thriving business owner, successful at what they do. It's just that each type, when we feel stress or pressure or anxiety, reacts differently, and the burnout happens for each type for different reasons, because each type has their own relationship with perfectionism. And that's what we usually unpack when we're working one-on-one, or when you do some of my inner circle work, is trying to understand what's your relationship with perfectionism, right? So, for example, the people person out of these types, they burn out because their perfectionism is around relationships and being perfect and having perfect relationships and keeping everyone happy, versus say the high achiever, whose their perfectionism is around work and achievement and being perfect in every single area. They burn out because good enough is not good enough for them. They want to be perfect in every area, despite their own mental health. That's the thing. They're willing to neglect everything to get the job done or to be perfect, compared to the people person who's willing to neglect everything for relationships. The high achiever really focuses on neglecting everything to get the work done, the goal done, whatever it is done. So that's the thing you can unpack. And so of the 4 types, you've got 2 that are reactors and 2 that are responders. So reactors are the leader and the high achiever. Responders are the calming presence and the people person. Now, why is that? So reactors have what we call like an adrenaline or cortisol or hyperarousal response. So when they're under stress and pressure, they react quickly. They go less about thinking and then a bit more emotive. So they kind of step into action straight away and sort of make more mistakes, because it's sort of, I react straight away rather than thinking through. On the other end, you've got your responders, the calming presence and the people person. They're more what we call the hypoarousal. So they actually are slower with action, but they make less mistakes. So they tend to, if something happens in the workplace or the business or in life, they need a moment to process it, take it in, before going into fixing mode and addressing it. But because they respond rather than react like the other types, they're a little bit slower in the decision making. However, when they do make a decision, it's thought through and there's less mistakes. So because of the way they react, so you've got your leader and your high achiever personality type who react quickly but make mistakes and can be a little bit emotive, versus the responders who take their time but make less mistakes. When you react, that tends to be growth. You know, reactors are great with growth parts of life, career, and the business, whereas responders are good at making stability. And so you can imagine in a partnership, in a relationship, in life, in business, in workplaces, you need both growth and stability. So Maya Angelou has a really good quote where you need passion and patience in equal amounts. And she talks about this analogy of patience doesn't build the building, but passion gone too far knocks its walls down. You really need to have people who are going to push and grow and move fast, the reactors, and people who respond, who think things through, who create stability. So in anything you do, you need both growth and stability, because without stability, you don't have the foundations and the scaffolding to hold things together. But without growth, you don't stay competitive and move forward or have new ideas or pivot with the market, right? So when you have a team of people, you might think to yourself that you really want the leader and the high achiever initially, right? Because they seem to get things done, they move fast, they action quickly. However, too much of that is a very adrenaline, ADHD fueled kind of environment. It feels very quick, busy, chaotic, and there's no stability there. There's not a sense of calm. There's no sense of thinking things through. And you need those people who will follow up actions and think out the possibilities and follow things through. And you need to have patience with people like that. So if you're naturally a responder, you need to learn how to have patience for people. If you're naturally a reactor, you need to learn how to have patience for people who are responders. And if you're a responder, you need to learn how to articulate to people that you need time in a diplomatic way. So for example, if you're someone who's the calming presence or the people person, usually under stress and pressure, what that means is that you shut down a little bit. The calming presence goes inwards and the people person is focused on keeping everyone happy, but both of those things don't actually address the problem at hand. So because you take things in and you need time to respond, if you're dealing, say, with a client, you need to be able to say, look, I hear you. Let me get back to you in 48 hours and we'll reconnect and I'll talk to you about some of the ideas I have. It bought you some time. Or if you're dealing with a manager or a team, again, talking about, I hear everyone's great ideas. Let me think about this more thoroughly and I'll get back to you like within 48 hours. Again, buying time. And same with the people person, learning to not always focus on keeping everyone happy, but to switch to dealing with the problem a little bit more and learning to not take on so much of everyone else's emotions. So it's understanding all of that and how they all work together, right? So again, if you've got a team, the calming presence is needed because if there's a situation, a high pressure situation, or you're in a relationship with someone who's the calming presence, if you're chaotic and adrenaline fueled, imagine being around someone who on the outside is very quiet, it's very calm. It brings you down. Now, the calming presence is going to tell you that they do not feel calm. They're calm on the outside, but they're freaking out on the inside. But having someone like that around who is calm and responds on the outside can bring down the chaos that the other types have. So you can see how the more you understand these types and yourself, the more you can articulate what you need, what you don't need, how you can support each other in high stress situations. Now, there are strengths to all of these types. So the people person is the most charismatic of them all. They're great with dealing with if you've got an agitated client, or you need to have a salesperson, or you need someone to smooth things over, or a networking event. These people are the best to send out because they are so good with people and reading a room. So these are the people you want. The calming presence, same thing again. If you know that there needs to be calm in a situation, or you want someone who actually thinks things through, this is the person you want to involve, because this is the person that listens to people and hears things out and has that calm presence that so many people respond to. We all have that person who doesn't say a lot but has a powerful energy because of the fact that they're calm and they don't say a lot. This is the calming presence. Now, the high achiever, this is the person that will get shit done. They will get it done, rain, hail, or shine. And so obviously having someone in the team like this is incredibly important, because sometimes you need someone you can rely on, who has good ideas and who can see things through. And the high achiever is really good at taking action and being there and being reliable. And then the leader is incredible at leading. So Unlike the high achiever, they're also good at getting things done. However, the leader is much better at letting go. So they're able to delegate tasks. They're able to see things for, okay, this is what needs to be done. You can do this, you can do this, you can do this, I will do this. Here's the deadline, let's get it done. So they're incredible at kind of systems and looking at the whole situation and understanding what needs to be done, versus the high achiever who tends to be able to do all of that on their own, but obviously at a cost. So the leader is very good at that. Now, the downsides of each of these 4 types. Let's start with the leader because we just were there. Because they're so good at getting clear and direct and delegating, if they're too strict with that, or the delivery of their voice is quite firm and assertive, they can accidentally be seen as a bully. They themselves don't see that. It's others' interpretation that if you've got a people person or a calming presence, or people who aren't used to that level of direction and assertiveness, the leader needs to be able to articulate that, hey, I might be clear and direct. It isn't personal. It's just that this is what it takes to get the job done. But if you have any issues, please feel free to bring it to me. So really creating that sense of I'm here for you as well, because there can be the leaders are also very competent, and sometimes people are intimidated by the fact that they're competent, they're confident, they can articulate themselves and delegate. And sometimes that leaves people feeling like they're not approachable. So if you identify as a leader, or you can see that a leader's in your team, how can you soften a little bit, and how can you take a page from the people person and be a little bit lighthearted, care a little bit more about people's emotions, and be a little bit softer? Because again, without intentionally doing this, but the leader can come across as a little bit harsh. So taking that step. So the downside of the high achiever, again, we just talked about the high achiever gets shit done. The downside of that is that they will get it done at the cost of everything else in their life, for one. And also, they have trouble letting go. So because they can be perfectionistic at work, that's great in terms of, they do a high quality job, and again, they're very highly competent. However, they have trouble letting go because they know they do a good job. So instead of delegating like the leader, they take everything on. Now, can they do it? Often they can, but that means that they burn out their relationships. They work really long hours. They have trouble letting go. They have trouble teaching other staff how to do things. And so another downside of the high achiever is they can come across as cold or controlling. And that's purely because they are controlling and they're not emotive. So sometimes the leader can be a bit like emotive of, you do this, let's get it done. Almost like a urgency feeling. The high achiever is a little bit quieter and they just get on with it and do it, but they're not thinking about other people's feelings or anything, or they're not thinking about how it makes other people feel when they don't allow them to do things, or they critique their work, or they micromanage them. They just do it. And so there can be a little bit of OCD kind of tendencies there and difficulty letting go, a lot of high anxiety there. The calming presence, again, we talked about on the outside, they're super calm, they balance out all these other types, and they're the person you want to almost regulate the team. But the downside is that they can be seen as lazy or not caring for the same reason. So imagine this, something really hectic happens in a business or in the workplace and everyone else is like, oh my God, this is a big deal. The calming presence might sit there quietly, non-reactive, they're responding. they are freaking out on the inside, but on the outside they're not. So sometimes other types don't know how to interpret that quiet, calm persona. And they see it as they don't care, or they're lazy, or they're not taking action. So if you identify as the calming presence, or you're in a relationship with the person who's got a calming presence, or you have them in your team, it's important to recognize that you take time or they take time. So to get the best out of them, recognizing that they take time, they are going to come with a response. They are in fact caring a lot. It's just not showing on the outside. Like it's like the duck. Their feet are going like this under the water, spiraling really fast, but on the surface, they're very calm. And it can be frustrating if you're freaking out and you think that they're not because they're so calm, but they genuinely are. Now, if you have someone in your team who's a calming presence, or you're the calming presence yourself, what's really important is to learn how to articulate that response of, I hear you, let me think about this and I'll get back to you within 24 hours or 48 hours. Like buying yourself that time, because often if you're put on the spot, you don't have the answer. And in fact, if people pressure you and put you on the spot even more, you retreat even more and you sort of disengage, and you might switch off your phone or have some avoidance, like you don't want to deal because of the pressure. And so it's really important to buy yourself that time, or be able to get the pressure off by saying, I hear you, I will get back to you within 48 hours or 24 hours. So that's a really important skill for the calming presence, so that people don't misinterpret that calm persona as not caring. Now, the final type is the people person. Now, the downside of this person, because again, we talked about the upside. They're charismatic, they're great with people, they're great salespeople, they're great to help mitigate things in a crisis. If you've got a client who's agitated, the people person is great at bringing them back down and getting them on board. The downside of these people is they can be seen as a little bit airy-fairy or a pushover. It's almost like sometimes their kindness and niceness is seen as weakness, and it absolutely is not. But if you identify as a people person, it's very important to understand that you can't do everything for everyone just to please everyone, because you will be seen as a pushover. In fact, having boundaries can make your relationships stronger and earn you more respect. So the people persons need to learn how to not say yes to everything, and to focus on addressing problems rather than keeping everyone happy, because those two things are very different. So again, if there's a crisis in the workplace, the people person, instead of addressing the cause of the crisis, tends to focus on, oh, I can see that this person's upset or this person's angry. How can I make everyone feel better? So they're more concerned with addressing the relationships and the feelings around the problem rather than the problem themselves. And again, just as a reminder, for all of these personality types, these habits, these traits, they all happen automatically, not by choice, not consciously. These happen almost unconsciously and on default until you notice it, which is why understanding this about yourself, you'll catch it when you'll start to notice that you're doing it, because without this framework, you just do it and not even realize you're doing it. So the people person really need to learn how to set boundaries and to take a step, again, out of the leader's perspective or the high achiever, where focusing on the problem at hand and learning how to set boundaries and delegate a little bit more. That is the key thing with the people person. Now, I hope that that was informative for you and got you thinking about your type and maybe the people's in your lives type and what you need to articulate to each other, whether it's that you tend to be more adrenaline fueled or you tend to need more time to process, you're a reactor, a responder. One other thing that can be really helpful when it comes to whatever type you are is owning it and reframing it when it comes to the downsides of your type. So if you're a leader, and we just talked about you might be seen as a bully, own the fact that, hey, sometimes I can be a little bit more assertive and people don't understand that, but reframe it as, but I'm really good at delegating and I understand how to soften to get people on board. So own the fact that that can happen, then reframe it. You know, so same thing with the high achiever. I'm really good at getting things done and sometimes I take on too much, but I'm aware of that. And I know that something I need to work on is learning to let other people take on tasks too, and to be okay with mistakes. So you can see how each one can own it and reframe it. So think about that for you with the calming presence. Own the fact that sometimes people don't know how to interpret your calmness, but reframe it as, but all that is me thinking things through and coming up with a plan. Own the fact, the people person, own the fact that you're really good with people, but sometimes you can be seen as a pushover, but reframe it as, but when push comes to shove, I know how to get things done, and really own that and try to act that as well. All right, I know that somebody has gotten an epiphany out of this today, and I'm so excited. So always feel free to message me. And again, if you want to share this with your team or your partner about the personality types, feel free to take that and tell them to take that quiz as well. And I will see you in the next episode of Burnout to Brilliance.